Swipe and gripe on a Thursday. We're going to talk about Nikola. Did Nikola Jokic have a great postseason? Did he really have a great postseason? Yeah, he probably did. But we're going to talk about that. Plus, I've got a no half measures concept for team building that I think is worth at least talking about. And we're going to do some predictions on what the future looks like for Michael Malone with the Denver Nuggets. All that and more on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us every day. We call them everydayers, where you just every day you're like, hey, I'm going to listen to Locked On Nuggets. We appreciate you guys doing that even throughout the offseason. We appreciate all of your support. Hope you guys are enjoying, well, if nothing else, a less stressful. No, Swipe is not enjoying a less stressful as the Nuggets are not in the Western Conference.
Michael Malone said he's not watching. It's been hard to watch, I will say.
I would imagine because I'll just continue to say I think that they stomped the Mavericks. I just think that they stomped them. On today's show, we're going to talk about, did Nikola Jokic really have a great postseason? Because Swipe had a tweet about that. We're going to talk about, I have this idea for, I've been thinking a lot about roster building for the Nuggets, and I'm always of the, hey, you need veterans that can play. But what about the other way? I've been thinking about that a lot. We'll talk about that, plus some predictions on Michael Malone and his future with the Nuggets. Talk about that in the last segment. His name is Swipa. You can catch him on Swipacam on Twitter and on YouTube. Check out his YouTube channel because his stuff's awesome. He's on Bleacher Report. He has so many cool stuff going on. Check out Swipa on those platforms. My name is Matt Moore. I'm at HP Basketball, where my profile photo is now locked onto a picture of Maggie from the Wolves, because apparently that I am, if you change your profile picture, Twitter thinks that you're trying to pull some nonsense. And so I'm just locked because I lost a bet on game 4 because I thought that the Wolves were going to lose game 4. All right, let's start here, Swipe. So you guys tweet about this, and I thought it was a good segment to kind of talk about. Nikola Jokic this year in the playoffs per game. Nikola in 12 games, 28.7 points, 13 rebounds, 8.7 assists. He shot 54.5% from the field. He shot 26% from 3. He did shoot 90% from the line on 5.9 attempts, 1.4 steals, which is a playoff career, not high, but second high, and 0.7 blocks per game, which is a little bit down from last year. Give me the argument that you've got for the idea that Nikola Jokic had a great postseason.
So that's the thing. I think the problem is, like, when we measure Joker versus Joker, is like, did he have a great playoff run? So, like, you know what I mean, in 2 rounds? I think some of this is, like, you have to look at Joker as a standalone player in this instant. You know, having a player, for him to be able to average 29, 13, and 9 on 62.5 true shooting, he shot 62% from 2 in the playoffs. His 3-point shots what failed him. He did not shoot well from the 3-point line. Shot 90% from the free throw line. In the first round versus the Lakers, I believe he had a 68 true shooting. And then I believe he had a 59 true shooting in the second round versus Rudy Gobert and them. But he did that because he shot 25% or 29% from 3. So he actually shot 60% from 2. So inside of the 3-point arc, shot 60% from 2. But then he shot 86, 87, I believe, percent from the free throw line. So I think some of this is defensively, I think is where it comes in. I think he had in this playoff run 2 really good defensive games. I think he had 1 average game, and I think every other game was below average or poor defensively. Is kind of how I would weigh that. I think games 4 and 5 defensively for him for the Wolves were incredible, and especially game 5. You know, he had that 40-point, 13 assists, 7 rebound game, no turnovers. Had a 77 true shooting, I want to say, in that game. Everybody was calling him the best player in the world. This is one of the, best performances we've ever seen. But I think his defense outside of that, I think it was either the energy, playing the minutes. I think his offensive load was incredibly high this year. I think Jamal Murray not being good this playoff run had a lot to do with that. He just did not have a co-star that can go bar for bar with the other team's best guard or perimeter player. AG, was really good at times, very spotty at times. Michael Porter Jr., very good first round, not a good second round. There was just not a lot of consistency around him. Even game 7, Joker didn't have like the best of games, but Joker had 34, 19, and 7 in that game. And so I think for context, it's like he had 21 points in the second half and 15 points in the fourth quarter on 50% from the field. So if you look at all of it in the vacuum, and then also he led the playoffs in PER. He was the second most efficient high volume scorer behind Kevin Durant in the playoffs. Nikola Jokic, by the way, leads the NBA playoffs in assist percentage at 40.3. He's even ahead of Luka and LeBron. He also is leading the playoffs in win shares per 48. He leads the entire playoffs still in win shares in totality. He leads the playoffs in block plus minus, leads the playoffs in VORP. Like, it's basically just all the numbers that give him the MVP and won him the MVP. And I think your favorite stat, EPM, the playoff EPM, also speaks to how I think to what Joker's doing as well. Like, he had a very good playoff. The problem is that he just didn't have the complete, utter dominance, led the NBA playoffs in points, rebounds, and assists on all-time efficiency through 20 games through an NBA title. He didn't do that again. So I think he stepped down below where he was last year.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question of, do you want to judge Nikola on his peers, which is the rest of the league?
Yeah.
Or do you want to judge Nikola based off of his standard? Like that, I think is like an interesting question. I do think he wore out. I'll just say this, and I said this after game 2, and I'll continue to say it. I am not going to blame Jamal Murray for Nikola Jokic's games. I think that is horse manure. I think that is guano. I think that's nuts. I think that's crazy.
Ace Ventura reference?
Yeah. So I just don't think it's fair to be like, it's on the second best player for how the best player plays. No. Yes, your teammates definitely impact how you play. That's absolutely certain. That was the Mavericks fans' response for why Luka needed to win MVP. Well, if they were healthy, he would have won MVP. And I'm like, but they weren't. And his performance needs to raise everybody up. And that to me is like a significant kind of measure of this. And if you ask, like, do you think Nikola didn't raise anybody up? Oh, he obviously did. Did he raise it enough? No. Part of the issue is that, and I've talked about this a lot, of I don't know how to judge him by the numbers, because I've seen him have statistically insane games where I was like, I don't think Joker played that well. And I've seen him have like 24, 7
4 points, 16 assists versus Detroit, dominates the game. Yeah.
Like 24, 7, and 9 and dominate. Yeah. And so I don't know. Yeah. It's hard for me. What I don't want to do is I don't want to be like, his stats weren't great, but he was amazing in this game. And then in the same breath be like, well, you can't really say he was bad because look at the numbers. And so like, that's a real trap. Now you don't want to go, I don't want to go the other way here either, where it's like, look, is 34, 17, 9 good? Yes, it's good. I think the way that I've kind of in the weeks that have followed, where I've kind of gotten to is, did Joker have a good postseason? Yes. Did he have a good enough one? No. And like, that really is the reality here, is like, whatever level you have to get to, that's where you have to go to. And I hold that same standard for every single superstar. I don't blame Chris Middleton when Giannis struggles. If it's like, I will get this from Bucks fans. We're like, look at his numbers. I'm like, okay, but his inability to hit a jumper and the fact that he wore out, he was exhausted by the end of it, that cost him. Like, they couldn't win the games because of that. And I do think the biggest thing, and Adam and I are going to probably talk a lot about this summer, since we're going to have a lot of time, is Adam and I are in pretty much lockstep agreement on this, that the minutes are catching up with Nikola. That to me is like the biggest takeaway I have, and from a Nikola Jokic standpoint from the playoffs, is this is the first time that I have been like, every playoff game, I'd be like, I know Joker's going to be there in the fourth quarter. He's going to have more than everybody else. Like, I've written so much about it, about how he outpaced Anthony Davis. And this was the first playoff time when I was like, man, there were games when he didn't have anything left. He just didn't have anything left. And the Nuggets are going to have to figure out how to rebalance some of that. And that's extremely difficult with where they're at from a team building standpoint.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about this later, but this is the first time I think they legitimately have to get a backup center. I think some of this is that. I also think this too. Joker played 79 games this year. Do you remember what he played the year before?
66?
69. Played 69 games the year before. Like, they pushed it, like you talked about at the end of the season. That obviously mattered. Joker he just felt healthy too. Like, he just felt good. But I think, me and you disagreed going into the playoff about, how good does Jamal Murray have to be for the Nuggets to do what they have to do. I still am of the mindset that if he is a playoff Jamal Murray, they're still playing and they're probably up 2-3-1, some situation like that to the Mavs. I just don't think that Jamal had the juice consistently. And you remember game 2, I believe it was. Remember, I think Jamal started off 1 of 10 and 0 of 5, but every time he missed those bunnies, they would run out on the other end and then they would go score. And I just think Jamal, just because of his injury, he just wasn't able to get to the point. And I don't blame Jamal for Joker. Joker, his biggest drop off was his missing 3-point shots.
Yeah,
that was the biggest issue. That made the difference.
Yeah, it was brutal.
So and he was 2 of 8 in the second half versus the Timberwolves because of the way they're playing defense. But I think that's too, like if Joker's shooting 38% from 3, 40% from 3, then maybe it's a different scenario. But I think if you ask me how did he play, I think he played great, because you're not going to find players in NBA history averaging 29, 13, and 9 on good, really like above average efficiency through an NBA playoff run versus Anthony Davis and Rudy Gobert. The problem is that Joker is now being compared to himself, similar to how LeBron was at his apex as well. That's just kind of where he's reached. And Luka, on the other end, that's what broached the conversation with me. I mean, Luka in the first 2 rounds wasn't good. But now it's like he's had these first three good games versus the Timberwolves and a not so great game 4, and like the conversations are shifting. And so I'm just like, I think a lot of people in the first couple of rounds, Luka wasn't even a top 5 player in the playoffs at that point. And I think he got outplayed by SGA as well. So, But Joker's being compared to himself at this point.
Last thing here, Carlos says, well, then by your definition, every superstar that doesn't win a championship is not, quote, good enough. No, Carlos, the stipulation I would say there is you do have to evaluate the team in terms of, was the roster good enough to win a championship? I'm sorry, this roster is good enough to win a championship. You know how we know that? They won a championship. So, I know that they're good enough, and I'm not saying that the reason that they didn't is because of Nikola. It was a collective failure, and Jamal gets the biggest chunk of the blame. I think Malone gets a huge chunk of it. But also, Joker's entire basketball ethos, existence, and the reason why, I've been an advocate for him is because he makes everybody better, and he didn't make everybody good enough. And that's the reality of it. On the other side, so we'll talk about this because I think this is a very good way to point out how insane my idea is, but I do want to bring it up here. The draft is supposed to be really bad, and super dope hip hop in the comments here on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets says this. Should the Nuggets go all in on one of the worst drafts ever? Join us next. Yes. That's what we're going to talk about next. Should the Nuggets go in on one of the worst drafts ever? Join us next here on Locked On Nuggets. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the easiest way for you to get tickets right up to the start of the event and even after. They've got great prices on absolutely everything. My birthday's coming up, and my wife has already told me she's got tickets on Gametime reserved for one of my favorite concerts, so I'm really excited to go see that. She was able to get a flash deal on it and find great ticket prices for it. I'm really looking forward to it. They've got, you can save even more if you do zone deals where you choose a section and then Gametime chooses the seats for you. You get all-in pricing. You can toggle that on so you're not going to get caught by any of those hidden fees, because I hate it when I'm going to a game and it's like, oh, it's this much. And then you get to the end and you're like, why is this like twice as much as I thought it was? That's a big reason why. Look, the Rockies are the Rockies, but that stadium's still amazing. And you want to catch a game, go after the first inning, and you can walk right in, go up to the rooftop bar, and be able to catch a great game not great game. You can catch a really great environment for watching a game in town. They've also got a lowest price guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find a better deal. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. All right, let's go ahead and talk about this. So I have criticized. I was very openly critical of the idea that like the Nuggets might have won if they played Jalen Pickett more. Still, Jalen can become an incredible player. I'm looking forward to watching him in Summer League. Maybe Hunter Tyson evolves into a rotation piece. Maybe Julian Strother's that guy. Like he had some real moments this season. But I've been pretty. I'm always going to be kind of I think that the 2 timelines thing is really difficult. And if you're trying to win championships right now, the most direct path is to get veterans, and those guys know how to play, and then you can trust them in playoff environments. However, there's diminishing returns on that. And the Bucks are like a really good example of this. You just run out of guys. You're just cycling through guys that are at the end of their career on minimum contracts because everybody wants to get paid. They do want to compete for championships, but they want to get paid. And so that means it's really hard to sustain long-term growth, which is why everything that Calvin Booth talks about with the new CBA and trying to build this way, I think is really accurate. I think Booth has a high level of confidence in the guys that he's drafted, and that's not atypical. I think most GMs really believe in the guys that they drafted, which leads us to kind of this year. So I've gone so far in on like, hey, like you're gonna need you need guys that can play. And veterans are an easier solve there. But I was thinking the other day about what about the opposite? What if we went the other way here? And again, super dope hip hop in the chat is like, should the Nuggets go all in on one of the worst drafts ever? Join us next. That's kind of my point. Is if you want to build through the draft, if you want to go with young players, this is the one where you can actually get great historical value. There's already reports that the Jazz are offering the 10 and their other pick in the teens for a win now player. Now, I'm not advocating trading Michael Porter Jr. for the 10 and 19 in a terrible draft. But what I am saying is you should at least explore options for, can you move up? And if you identify a guy in this draft that you think fits perfectly with your team, not objective value, but it's like, look, his value in a vacuum in draft analysis is one thing, but in this team, he could be a hugely impactful player. Maybe that's an angle to go on, because if you're able to lessen the burden in terms of trading significant high salary players for more components, it gives you flexibility. In order to fill that gap, you'd take on various contracts that would give you more options. You'd still have some veterans, even if they're younger. Again, not zeroing in on the Jazz here, because I don't think the Jazz are like, ooh, Michael Porter Jr., but I do think that, like, if you look at these options and you go that way, and you're able to be like, we came out of this with multiple options for veteran pieces that we can mix and match to try and problem solve what we need in the playoff series. And we came out with a draft prospect that we believe fits and can have a super high upside, and that gets us sustainable going forward. I think that's something that you have to look at.
I have mentioned this a couple of times, actually. I had to talk with Ryan about this. You know, you mentioned something that if you're going to go young, then why not go young and good? You know, if you're going to get a player in the draft anyway, then why not get a good one? And at this point, I'm like, well, if Calvin Booth is committed to this idea that he wants to get 3 and 6, 4 and 8, meaning championships in a number of years, and he wants to work the CBA by utilizing rookie contracts, well, you already have 5, I think, rookie contracts on the roster in total. Are you going to add a 6th and 7th? Or are you then going to say, well, let's just go get a dude that we know can play? Like, if the Nuggets were somehow able, Matt, to go and get Steven Castles and say, we're going to go into the top 12, go into the top 13 or whatever, and we're going to go get a wing that we know guaranteed can be a ball handler, can play, and that can grow in our system, and can be a win-now rookie on a rookie scale deal, well, then why not? That, for me, it's just a matter of if we're going to buck the trend of NBA history of having really solid veteran rotation players, which is what wins. Like, especially when you win dynasties, your Sean Livingstons, your Ron Harpers, your Steve Kerrs, like those players of that archetype. Then I'm just like, well, why don't they just take their assets, go get a guaranteed great young prospect, and go get you your J-Dub. Bring them off the bench, do what you got to do, and then let them grow and develop. But you know those dudes can win. So, you know, I believe in veterans. I believe you have to have veterans on the roster that know what they're supposed to do. But again, not old veterans, but you can find dudes on cheaper end. You know, again, we had a conversation. Derek White was got for a first-round pick in Josh Richardson. That's what he cost. They got him when he was younger, and then they grew him into the system, and now all of a sudden he's a borderline all-star player, top 4 rotation player on the roster. And then you get other players like, you know, KCP, Bruce Brown. Like, you find players that are of an archetype you need, meaning the Nuggets need defensive guards that can guard next to Jamal Murray and play off the ball and can reduce the load he has to carry, especially when Joker's not in the game. That's a part of the reason why Jamal was so dominant in the 2023 playoff run, because Bruce took a lot of things off his plate and he was able to play within himself at the highest value. So then my whole thing is just like, well, then just do that with the veterans or go get really good and young. Because for me, Matt, if you're saying that you're going to get the 28th overall pick in a rookie draft class and you're going to take another gamble, you already took a gamble on 21 and Christian. It worked. You took a gamble on 30 and Peyton. It's worked mostly so far, but he's still super young, didn't play a lot in the playoffs. And then you got Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson. So, like, at what point do you say, let's just go get a certified, bona fide talent that we know is going to be a guaranteed rotation player for Michael Malone that he's going to be able to trust because he's good enough to be in the rotation and consistent enough to be in the rotation?
Yeah, I think the question is just like, can you get those guys, right?
Right.
Like, I think that's the challenge is like the Nuggets assets for reconfiguring are distressed. I'll just be really honest about that.
Mm-hmm.
When I've queried, it's not that GMs are low. The executives I've talked to, that's not that they're low on Michael Porter Jr. They're like, he's so pivotal for them and he's so good at opening the floor and he's such a knockdown shooter. But if you ask them about like the value, they're like, he has had multiple back surgeries and he doesn't have any on-ball creation. So he's great for Denver, but what does he do for me? That's like a serious conversation that I've had is like, yeah, like he knockdown shooters like that 6'10" that can shoot like that are always going to be valuable. But on that contract with that injury history, with that skill set, Michael Porter Jr.'s value to the Nuggets is just way higher than it's going to be in a vacuum. And I mean, that is like leaps and leaps and leaps and leaps and leaps and bounds. And so then you really start to run into problems. But the other thing that I think is important about this is I have started hearing, look, there's a lot that can change between now and July 15th. Like it's a month and a half. There's a lot that can change. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's market's going to be nuts.
Mm-hmm.
The number of teams, because KCP is a guy that is on an appropriate contract that for whatever his new deal would be, like they're like, no, that makes sense. Like they can get like the contract and player are going to even out. It's going to make sense. And so that means that everybody's going to want in on him because he helps everybody else win. And if they can't replace him, and if you're like me and you don't believe that Christian Brown's the answer at the 2 guard, then that means like you're going to need to get extremely creative for next season because you can't just dump MPJ. And even if you do, like this is one of the things is you can dump MPJ and still not have the flexibility because of AG, Jamal, and Joker to be able to go out and revamp the team. So you have to work within these very, very, very tight margins. And one of the downsides of if you were to approach this is if you whiff, if the guy that you draft isn't ready, or if like there's so many things, if he has an injury, like there's so many things. If you go this route and you single in on like what's this young talent that can like really push this team forward and you miss, it's a catastrophe. And so like that's the real risk that I think the Nuggets are at. It's really why, you know, there was reasons to talk about dynasty, but we're a year later and I'm like, man, I don't know how they're going to do this. And like, I think the Nuggets have a lot of smart people, including not only Calvin, but Tommy Balchettis and all of their Tanzer, their cap guy, all of those guys involved, I think will come out with some smart ideas. But I think there does need to be like a lot of concern for what they're going to look like when August 1st rolls around.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to do whatever they can to sign KCP, you know, and I think if KCP's happy in Denver, then you're matching whatever he's getting offered. I mean, I don't really think there's much of a conversation surrounding that. I think KCP is going to get anywhere between 20 and 23 mil a year. Just depends on the years and how long, you know, maybe 2 for 1. Do you think that's crazy? Is it 22 is 20 to 22 is crazy? 20,
oh, sorry. I was laughing at something in the comments. No, that's a completely reasonable.
Yeah. Like, and I just think that about 3 years is what you're going to get. And so, I mean, there is no, you got to do it. I don't believe Christian Brown is that much worse than KCP. I think he's a good bit worse than KCP at this point. He just he's not developed yet, but that's not his fault. He's young. You know, KCP even had to grow into his role. Ask Detroit. They learned. Right. Even ask the Lakers. The Lakers didn't love him in 2021, which is why they shifted the ball for nothing. So he's grown into this role. But I think a lot of this is, man, like, this is for me where the veteran stuff come in. I don't think they should go into another draft and say, let's just take a swing late in the draft, and then we're just going to hope for the best and believe that our player development and our talent evaluation is going to win it out. I just don't think that is something that you can continually do for the third straight season in the middle of Jokic's prime.
I love international fans because here are the suggestions that have been roped in. They should draft Topic, and they should get Vasily Micic. I'm not saying that those guys are not good, although I think the fact that that OKC was like, no, we're good. I think that's probably representative of a sign, but also just like there are guys that whose names don't end with itch that you can probably get. Hurricane says sign Haslam. Matt will love it. Not wrong. Love it. Love that idea. One thing I also think about that in this draft though is I do think you're going to be able to get some bigs, and I do think that they need to draft a center that they can believe in, and that they can really be like, this is going to be our backup center long term. Like they got to. I do think they got to solve that one way or another.
So we're talking about like what, Kyle Filipowski?
Maybe.
Is that what you're thinking?
Maybe.
Okay. All right.
I know. Look, I'm not. Again, you're gonna need like to find some diamonds in the rough because this is the roughest draft that you're gonna find, right? But you also don't get to wait a year. This is the draft that you have, right? Edie is a popular name in the comments. Darren Holmes.
Edie.
Yep.
I think he's going like in the teens, so unless they're going to trade up for him, guaranteed. But
well, that's what I'm saying is like I think if you're going to go get a guy, you need to trade up.
Well, but Matt, help me understand then. Like, what is the reason not to, other than you're just going to take a gamble? Like, 'cause that doesn't make sense to keep saying in the middle of the dynasty. Like, this is the Shogun era. Like, we're in Shogun era. Why am I wasting time trying to develop younger players that are like at the back of the draft for a reason, as opposed to going up and get guaranteed qualified talent? Like, for me, it just doesn't. I mean, I just think doing that on a year-by-year basis, I think, is just something you can't do when you have players that are now headed into their age 29 season, age 27 season, age 26 season. That's your core. 29, 29, 27, and 26. They're not young. They're still young, but they're not young.
Yeah, and this is a big part of it, is those guys don't want to play with rookies. It's really funny watching guys go from the young guys that love playing with the other young guys to then being veterans who are like, do not bring these rookies around me. I do not have time for this. Like, when you're in winning time, it's really hard to be like, okay, I'll walk you through. Okay, you can go over here. No, you got to go over here. No, you got to. Right. Okay, when this happens.
All right. Come set the screen, please.
Yeah, that's the stuff that gets really tough. On the other side, I got some Michael Malone predictions that I think we should get to. We'll talk about that up next here on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us, making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us. A lively chat segment. We got a comment in the chat. Mavs got lively, and that worked out. True. Accurate.
Where did he go?
It was such a hit. That was such
Where
a hit.
Where did he
go? 11th.
Yeah, so they got him at 11, and then they traded for PJ and Daniil Gafford for nothing, basically. So, yeah, they got 3 players in a 6-month span that turned around their franchise.
Yeah, I think Harrison Wind over at DMVR has referenced Miles McBride, and I don't have like a good counter here. That's a second rounder that made a huge impact in the first and second round. Like Deuce is pretty good. I don't know if Deuce is going to be this every year. I'll just say that I'm a little bit like, we'll
you don't like 6'1" guards in New York?
I guess I do like 6'1" guards because I'm a really big fan of Rob Dillingham. Like I like Dilly, and I keep getting back to he's 6'1" and being like, that's probably not going to work. But God, I love his skill set. He's going to be
Bronny James fan. 6'1". You like 6'1" guards, Bronny James?
Oh God, what if they did?
Oh God. Calvin Booth, 37th.
I'm not
overall
prepared
pick.
for that today. Look, let's put that one aside for another day. I'm not prepared for that.
LeBron takes a minimum contract. Go ahead.
Noah says Lively was the third best rookie this year. No, I'd say fourth, because as much as I think he was the third most impactful, it's obviously Wemby and then Chet, and then Brandon Miller really was fantastic.
Brandon was crazy this year.
Brandon was really, really, really good. I have a lot of, and from what I hear,
Who's your first team all rookie? Those three and who?
Those three, Lively and Cason Wallace.
I think Cason. I Keontae. I think is my 6. I like Keontae.
Keontae's really good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Michael Malone. So I'm gonna go ahead and I made a prediction in 2020, the summer of 2022. I said if the Nuggets don't make the finals, Michael Malone gets fired. They made the finals that year. They won the title. He did not get fired. He has an extension. However, I will just go ahead and say this: if the Nuggets do not, gosh, I'm trying to decide if it's finals or Western Conference Finals. If they're not competitive in the Western Conference Finals, then he gets fired. No? Tell me no.
I don't know when have they not been competitive in a series fully healthy?
But that's kind of the thing, is like, I don't even think it matters if there's health. Like, I don't think that'll save him. Because I look at JB Bickerstaff, right?
That ownership group in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a different situation for me. And then
I would say actually that the Cavs ownership group has been more stable when it comes to coaching than the Nuggets.
Yeah, but they went out back-to-back years in the first round. The Donovan Mitchell experiment so far has not worked. They traded however many first-round picks for him. I think the thing with Malone, Calvin Booth Malone seemed to have a differing opinion on the young guys. Because remember, Booth even said in the end of the year press conference, I think those guys just need more burn. And I'm like, okay, well, so you're basically saying Jalen Pickett and Hunter Tyson and Julian Strother staying healthy, that will be the difference. Like, that's the difference for them.
That's the idea, is like, if you use them more, the guys would not play as many minutes, and then they would be fresher. The thing I have a problem with is I don't know that it's minutes. I think it's games. Like, that's kind of the key. And I don't think that you can really be like, hey, we're going to still try and win this game, even versus the Spurs, rolling out Hunter Tyson, Jalen Pickett, Julian Strother, along with like whoever else. And like, that to me is kind of the issue here, is like, they need to literally, like, next season, like, the big thing is they've got to give up on seeding. I yelled about it the back half of the year, and that doesn't mean I was right. It doesn't. I'm not saying it does. I am saying that I still continue to believe that you have to choose between, are you going to be healthy or are you going to get a top seed? In the year they won a title, they legitimately did both. Like, you talked about the difference in games that Joker played. He played fewer games, and they finished with the 1 seed because the West wasn't as good. You don't get to control the other teams. You don't get to decide how many games those other teams win. But you do have to be able to just kind of, like, the biggest problem for me, and I've talked about a lot about this on that show last Thursday, is Malone honestly needed to overrule his players and be like, guys, I want to win just as badly as you do. We don't win if we're not healthy. We're got to rest some of you guys. We have to tail off. And I think the players didn't want to do that.
How many games did the Clippers win? 51? I think it was 51. So,
yeah.
And then the Timberwolves were 56. So we think that if the Nuggets just kind of threw 5 games and then went and dropped to the 3 seed pretty comfortably over the Clippers,
yes,
maybe.
Yeah.
So you're saying that right there could have made the difference for them.
Yes, because look, if Joker, AG, KCP, if those three in particular had a little more in Game 7, I think they win. That's how tight the margin was. And then, like, everyone's gonna go like, but Jamal. No, I agree. I gave up on Jamal early. When he's coming back from a calf strain, I was like, he's not going to be good, guys. He's facing Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Anthony Edwards. This is a bad matchup on a bad calf. And I am okay saying he's got to be in better condition. Fine. He's going to do what it takes for him to not get hurt. Fine. But once that's the situation, you can win if the other guys are able to get you through and buy you time and then you figure it out, and maybe Jamal gets a little bit healthier, and then maybe he has a Jamal series in the Western Conference Finals, and all of a sudden the narrative changes, and we're talking about something completely different here. It's not excusing Jamal. It's that I don't put Jamal on the level of superstar. And you say, like, well, look at his contract. I understand why he's paid the way that he is. Like, lots of players in the NBA are paid not what their actual value is. And I don't look at Jamal Murray as superstar. I think he gets that level in the playoffs, and when he does, it's awesome. But if he's not able to get there, I'm like, well, you got to figure out something else. That's the whole thing. You have to solve problems. And that to me is like where this kind of gets to. We're away from Malone though. But if they don't compete in the Western Conference Finals next year, do you think that Malone's still the coach of the Nuggets the year after?
No, I mean, that means something that like catastrophic had to happen. Like they're not competing and they're like getting out in 4-1.
Or if they go, no, I'm saying if they go out in the Western Conference, like second round, like what if they go out second round again?
Just regardless of circumstance.
Yeah. Another game 7. They lose to whoever.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if he gets fired, but that's like the seat is blazing hot at that point. Jokic is 30. He's 30 now at that point.
So for me, a lot of this is that they sat at that podium together and they talked about they talked about how important it is for them to be on the same page. There's not like a lot of denying. They're not like, this is all nonsense, right? They're not denying the disconnect that exists. It's also not like uncommon in the NBA. Like, I thought Calvin's comments on it were very reasonable, which is like, it's my job to have big picture and it's his job to try and win games. Like, that's completely reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that over time, this does come to a point where it's also the GM's job to make sure that the coaching staff is in line with the vision that he has. That's his job. Like, you can't have it where you feel like you're building towards one thing and the person that actually manages the roster night to night is building towards another. And so that creates a tension point there that I think is relevant. And I'm not saying that means that Calvin wants to fire Michael Malone. They won a championship together, right? These things are complicated. Like, these dynamics are complicated and it's professional. And it's not, I don't think it's taken very personally because these guys are psycho competitors, but it doesn't have to be. But I do think that Michael Malone is going to need to figure out, like, this is what Michael Malone's got to do next year. He's got to get a top 3 seed, because somebody mentioned that top 3 seed, if you're not in the top 3, you don't win the title. It's true. You got to get a top 3 seed, and you got to make sure that the guys have played to a point where they're ready to go. And I don't know how to balance that. I don't have the answer, and it's going to be a wait and see and manage it through the season.
So do you think if they get a real backup center, that changes everything? Like, so then they'll be able to roll out. They're going to have Jalen, Julian, Peyton, and then they're going to have Reggie. He can be a player option, so he's going to be on the roster at least for whatever. And then they have a backup center that Jamal can play with, and they can kind of build some of those modern offense units together. You know, do you think that will be enough if they can get like a legitimate player that Jamal can play with without Joker?
I don't have the answer to this, which is the follow-up question for me. I don't know if the roster knows how to play without Joker. I legitimately don't. Like, there is something about the fact of how much this roster is built around Joker that even stuff that should be simple, like stuff that should be really easy, like and I think we saw it with Reggie and DJ, right? Like, those minutes got them through and actually won them a Clippers game this season in the regular season, right? And DJ's a net negative. I'm not like arguing against that, but you remember that Clippers game early in the season when Joker was out?
Yeah,
like Reggie,
Reggie Jackson had 35 points and 13 assists.
Yeah, like, that's like basic NBA stuff. Is you can just roll out like any center that can screen and roll, and you should be able to get there. And a lot of it is like, I'll say this, and this is, I don't know whether you blame Jamal. You can choose to blame Jamal or not for this. Jamal doesn't seem to understand how to run that stuff because he's never done it. When Monte and Mason were here, Jamal was off ball.
Mm-hmm.
And when Mason left, Jamal was just ISO. Like, well, Jamal's never worked with a non-Joker center.
He'll run it traditional with AG to the rim. The problem is that he's facing so many switch coverages instead of that coverage when AG's in the game. And also, to be clear, that's what the Nuggets started facing after that Clippers game. Remember, they started switching versus Reggie and DJ, or collapsing on the pick and roll because the Nuggets didn't have any shooters. around them that was going to threaten them. So then it took away some of their optimization, and their offense suffered because of it. So and that's the thing. I think if Jamal had a real big, like if Jamal had, obviously the peak is Drummond or whatever else. If you gave him that, then I think he'd be able to figure that out. Like, oh, okay, well, this is either vertical spacing, this is all the way to the rim, or this is a mid-range shot. And then he could eat 8 points a game off of that. But, you know, they're going to have to do it. Like, I think that's where Jamal has to be better, though. That's what I'm saying. I think he needs to take another leap in his game, because that's going to take some of the pressure off the rest of the roster as a whole.
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong.
He has the ability to do it?
Yeah, that's what I don't know.
So like the Booker leap and all that stuff, you don't know if Jamal has that in him.
I mean, this is a lot of it is like, I asked Ryan Blackburn, the world's biggest Jamal Murray fan. I asked him before game 1 of the NBA playoffs. I said, I just sat there. I was like, humor me in a what if. I was like, Jamal last year, 30 in the Western Conference Finals versus Lakers, 30 on 50, 40, 90. He's like, yep. And I was like, what if he doesn't do that this year? I was like, what if he just doesn't? Like, what if Jamal just doesn't do that? You know? And he hit 2 clutch shots versus the Lakers, which made up for the terribleness, or at least masked it for a series. But when Adam talks about the fact of like Jamal's numbers were pretty much the same, his assists were better this year, which I think like per 100 possessions, if you look at it, he took like over a 1 assist per game per 100 possessions jump. And that does matter to me. Like Jamal's playmaking does matter. He's gotten better in that facet of his game. But I also like, it's not like you don't watch him and he doesn't orchestrate that second unit and go like, wow, like he just like pulled all the strings.
That's limitations for him.
I don't know. Here's the thing. He's past an age point where I'm like, yeah, he can definitely get there. He might. I'm not saying he can't. He's not 30.
Do you think
he's not 31?
Relying on elite shot making then?
Yes.
So do you think, because he shot 48 and 42 this year from the field and from 3, and then shot 85% from the line. So that was actually really good. That's like one of like a few players in the league. But so then did that speak to Jamal? He's kind of capped his own game out. Like he mentally needs to take that leap to become a better, well-rounded player. And do you think now that he's further away from the knee injury, he can get back to go ahead?
The best development for him has been when he's played more like a pure point.
Yeah.
And that's not what he ever envisioned himself as. Like his favorite player, Steph Curry. Like he's known for these playoff explosive scoring performances. And I think if you want a good example of this, and Jamal is, I think Jamal's a much more self-aware player than this. Russell Westbrook only knew how to play one way. His entire career, he's only known how to play one way. And he's never done the work of like, maybe I need to like evolve. Like maybe I need to become like a different player. And he did a little bit this year in terms of becoming more defensive. But like Jason Kidd got to be late in his career and was like, I need to shoot threes. Like I need to be able to shoot threes. And he did that. And that was late in his career though. And so I don't know that it's not that Jamal can't, it's that I don't know if he will. And that to me is like a big question going into next season. And I don't think that adding a rim runner or a good pick and roll center in the backup center position automatically creates or fixes that. All right, we ran long. We got to take off. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Good conversation today. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Swipe will do a show with you tomorrow. We missed Wednesday's show. I was supposed to get a solo show in and got wrapped up with some stuff. So Friday night, I'll have a live show for you as well. Make sure to tune in. Thanks for joining us on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets. Till we see you again. Thanks for joining us.